Good morning. Thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to have been invited, and thanks to all the donor agencies and to all my fellow participants. It's not important whether you see me, you should be able to hear me, so don't worry if you don't see me, it's in order. I'll try to project my voice the best way I possibly can. So, and it's always a hard act to follow after India had spoken, but I decided consciously not to feel intimidated. So I'll try. Sorry. Yeah, all of us, you know the outline. Just a brief point of clarification. There are different departments that are responsible in South Africa for the social protection programs, and it's mainly departments of social development and health. So I work in the Department of Public Works, which is the coordinating department for public employment programs. And the public employment programs, once again, are implemented across a range of government departments. So I just need to get that clarification. All this information is well known to all of you. The point that we would like to make, and that I would like to, is this, the last point perhaps. One of the main problems in South Africa is that there are many poor people in the social security system, but no grant for those who are willing and able to work. And that is perhaps the gap, and that's where we believe public employment programs has a major role to play, and we should be trying to intensify and draw these linkages with thinking about public protection, rather public employment programs in the context of social protection in a much more nuanced way. Name of the program, and let me just point out, there's not enough time. I know India had been favored by not proper time monitoring. Sorry, Juliet, I'm joking. But the point here is, I'd just like to point out a few things here. Our objective for the EPWP, in this Expanded Public Works Program, that is to provide work opportunities and income support to poor and unemployed people through labor-intensive delivery of public and community assets and services, and thereby contributing to development. It's a mouthful, and we know it is, but we have tried to unpack it the best way possible so that we have a clear way what to do or what we can achieve and what we can't. So that we don't claim to solve the problems of the entire South Africa and the world and not achieving anything at the end of the day. So that is the important thing. The policy context, as a matter of interest, we don't have an official policy for the EPWP as yet. Therefore, there's no act directly guiding, but there are related acts and guideline documents. I will point out just the main ones, and that is the from after our first democratic elections in 1994 was the Reconstruction and Development Program. And then we had a white paper of social welfare in 97, a big one for us in 2011, the National Development Plan and Vision 2030. And I would like to quote from the National Development Plan. And that is that the provision of work opportunities is one of the most effective forms of social protection. There is no special grant for the unemployed working age population, but various labor market activation schemes exist, and these include the public works programs as well as training and skills development. And that is a major document for us, almost as that holds us together in terms of that we stay focused. Where do we want to be by 2030? And we try to make our small contribution in the broader national development plan. The EPWP has often been accused of multiple objectives, numerous ones, and it makes it obviously difficult to administer and really achieve or stay focused. But there are a few issues that we think that we should do in order to achieve the overall objectives of the EPWP and the whole range of things. This is more of an evolution of the program since 2004. Before that time, we had community-based public works programs since '96, I think it was, but they didn't achieve the desired impact on our high unemployment rate. For a population of 55 million, unemployment rate is official one at 27%, about 26.9%, but which in all likelihood youth unemployment would be closer to 40%. So you have an idea of what we are up against. Key design issues. The program is implemented across 4 sectors, across 3 spheres of government, and it is coordinated by the national or through the National Department of Public Works. Eligibility, we see ourselves as the employer of last resort. Our target groups, obviously, often the lowly skilled and poorly skilled and unemployed people. But there's no discrimination. If you feel you have a degree and you are prepared to take up the work that's on offer, that we won't show you a way. Our target is to create 6 million work opportunities over 5 years, and that's up to March 2019. And then I need to point this out, not that, this, we have clearly targets for designated groups. We strive to achieve 55% of women participation, 55% for youth, and 2% for people with disabilities across the 4 sectors. Very clear, and that's what we measure ourselves by in terms of, like when we compile our data. The budgets, we try to convert it into US dollars. It's anybody's guess what it is today. So I will not, please don't hold me to account for the dollar equivalent that we try to reflect there. Because, yeah, it's long history in terms of the economic volatility and fluctuations. But key innovations for us since we have started in 2004 was that we partnered with NPOs, with non-profit organizations, and the private sector, explore pathways into sustainable livelihoods, and the introduction of an incentive grant that I hope to touch on a little bit later if I can manage my time properly. This is the 4 sectors that I've spoken about. The infrastructure sector, led by the Department of Public Works, it includes obviously infrastructure departments. In our case, as in many other parts of the world, they command the biggest budget. Therefore, we have to focus on infrastructure departments to optimize labor-intensive implementation of, in order to create these work opportunities. But we have a particular focus also on what we call the environment and culture sector. Wonderful programs working for water, working on fire, working for wetlands, working for the coast, working environmental programs, obviously with a long-term impacts. But that's the key question is, if we don't do it, the price to be paid later on will be so high, so you don't necessarily see the short-term gains in terms of the outputs, but certainly you see the short-term gains in terms of income transfer into poor households for those who participate in these environmental programs. Social sector focus areas mainly on early childhood development centers and women obviously looking or taking care of these children, home community-based care. To us, it's an important focus. When you enable a woman, or when you look after a woman's child, you enable the woman to explore other options in terms of accessing economic opportunities and other things. I think it's a major thing that's often underestimated, and we were glad to see, obviously, the creches at the particular workplace. We don't, in Working for Water, we have something similar there, like at the work environment. People work high up in the mountains often, and different kinds of environments, so you have to provide it on site, but not in all cases on site in our case. And then what we call, it's a bit of a misnomer perhaps, but we call the non-state sector. But our aim here was in essence to get communities to decide what they need, what work needs to be done through the community work program, which is one of our major sub-programs, if I can call it like that, and then involvement of non-profit organizations, because we believe in our democracy, to advance it further, if we don't strengthen our links with civil society, that's perhaps where, and an active citizenry, that's what we perhaps should be pushing for in a much bigger way. And to us, that's a cross-cutting issue, even though I mentioned it under the non-state sector, it cuts across all sectors. Examples of public works programs. We have had 1 million pictures that I took out, and but just get an idea, I'm telling the truth. We even have videos here that people decided to sanction, not to show. No, I mean, sorry, no, there's no time to show the videos, but we actually brought videos along. We have some promotional material there at the back that you should certainly have a look at. An important one for us for public employment programs is the question of governance and institutional arrangements, because you can have wonderful resolutions and announcements by a president saying this will be done, this should be done. But the fact that it's an announcement, and you would notice I don't call it a decree, it is like a policy announcement, the prioritization of public employment programs as part of our major focus areas. But what we have found, you have to have the high-level political buy-in, not only by word of mouth, but you have to institutionalize these things so that even when people leave, that the institution exists still, and you have a vehicle to work with. And to that end, we have, and it is much more complex than this, but we have, as this high-level summary, what we call a public employment program interministerial committee. And this is chaired by the Deputy President of the country. And then it consists of various ministers. And so when I hit the brick wall as a professional public servant, it can be elevated to the politician saying, this is a political problem, Mr. Deputy President, that you and your ministers have to address in order for us as the public employment people working to do our work properly. And then below that, obviously, the directors general of different departments sitting in a technical, convening the technical secretariat, and set a structure below that as we work down into the provinces and to the linked. And then we have a structure here linked to the PEP IMC, that is what we call the Presidential Coordinating Council, where the president would meet with the premiers of the provinces. Let me move a little bit faster. My barometer is Julia's face, so I'm looking at it kind of thing. I'm trying to ignore, but it's difficult. We have strengthened community participation, as I've said. We try to forge partnerships with the private sector. It's an important one in terms of graduation, not only for graduation, for creating work opportunities, training opportunities, but also for exit strategies. I use the word with circumspection, but so we have had limited, we have success stories, albeit limited perhaps, and not nearly to the scale I would like it to happen. But like we mentioned the example here of pharmacist assistant program, other cases, the Wikipede program, a contractor development program in terms of enterprise development. We have also other examples where we have forged partnerships. We place people with motor manufacturing companies after they had undergone through a program for artisanal skills and those kind of things. And then, but I'm not going to put a lot of focus on, we have a national youth service program that links obviously to the earlier presentation by Colombia, and but I will not dwell on that too much, but it's an important component, hence our target of 55% youth participation. The national target for youth employment was set at 80%. 80%. We said for public employment programs, there's value add to have a healthy mix of experienced people working with young people. That's the one point. And the other point, obviously, in terms of social cohesion, you don't chase people out of, you have reached a certain age, therefore you cannot participate in public employment programs. It simply doesn't make sense in terms of building. The design issues, many challenges. Lack of technical capacity in public bodies to implement EPWP, data integrity issues, non-attainment of certain targets, and non-adherence to minimum daily wage that people need to be paid. But what we have learned is that community participation is crucial. Once communities understand what we'd like to achieve, it makes our lives easier, and there's better buy-in, of course. The question of accountability at all levels should be institutionalized. If you don't do that, you will talk until you're blue in the face and nothing will happen. The program design would have to be must be clearly communicated so that we don't create expectations that could become a reputational risk at a later stage. Across these, I've spoken to this one already, we implement a national program across three spheres of government. And we are the coordinating department, so I have to negotiate, but so many people sometimes beg, sometimes just plain kick and scream. Mostly I'm pretty decent in the way that I engage with people, but the point is even though we don't have a formal policy, we have an act, and that's a subset of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. We call it the Special Ministerial Determination on the Expanded Public Works Program, and that gives us a bit of clout to enforce certain things. Obviously, M&E, we have a very strong M&E framework with, in terms of data collection, but also in terms of a coherent program for evaluation studies to be commissioned, so that we have an idea consistently what's going on. We have site visits on a regular basis where we try to obviously increase the levels of confidence that people can have. Many of these challenges are pretty generic in a way, but I would like perhaps to emphasize just one or two. The important thing for us, and we have noticed, like in the case of MNREGA, they say it's one department implementing this program, so they hold the purse strings. We don't hold the purse strings for the for the public employment programs, only part of it. And the important thing for us would be to ensure that the implementation of or the prioritization of public employment programs, that it is mainstreamed across budget lines, which means it should not be, we shouldn't rely on the goodwill on an ad hoc basis of a municipal manager saying, yes, this is my contribution. We want the entire budget prioritized and rather tell us why you cannot create, because, and there's normally a high level of buy-in because of the many social problems going with unemployment, those kind of things. We have lots of material, SOPs, manuals to ensure that the EPWP is implemented as consistently as we possibly can across these. In terms of results, the impact, we have seen that there were fairly positive results all round. But big complaints also. Obviously, training is too short. People will complain about wage rates that are too low. It's never enough. But you know, the telling things always for us is not what I say about the program, but what respondents say. And when a woman tells you, for the first time in my life, I'm sleeping on a bed now, or I can send my child to school, or a father would tell you, I can now look my child in the eye, because I could bring home a loaf of bread. Those are the kind of things that really counts, in spite of what all of us say about the wonderful designs. So the point is, are we doing enough? in terms, we would love to upscale and increase wages, but the question always is, what are the trade-offs in terms of do you employ 50 people for 2 days or 2 people for 50 days? We go the option of rather spreading it across as many households as we possibly can, so that we can that the coverage would be broader. Independent evaluation studies are also commissioned, and that's the great thing about this one particularly. It's not what I have commissioned, but what SA says about the program, and it's fairly positive comments. And now I have to use this one. I think she had stolen. Okay, yeah. So we have learned a lot of things across the years since 2004. We have to increase community participation. I've mentioned political buy-in. A big challenge is the meddling of politicians in public affairs. Now, I'm in Manila, so I can say it here perhaps. No, I'm not joking, I say it there in South Africa too. But the point is, what really threatens successful implementation often is the question of patronage, clientelism, rent-seeking behavior, those kind of things. It is a major, major threat for all our programs. We've had stories where councillors interfere and demand some under-table payments from participants, for instance, and we address those issues up front. We've said we have to deal with this. But once again, those kind of things you have to build into your design. What we have learned in our EPWP phase 3, there's a basic set of 4 EPWP principles. One of them is the question of transparency in selection processes where communities participate. We're not where India is yet in terms of putting it up on public boards, but because communities should monitor this participation and expose people who are corrupt. Then programs need to be programmatized. Little bits and pieces of projects work, but where project work works well. And that's what we have done. We have done to try to replicate those programs that are successful and try to have them implemented in other provinces, etc. also. How much time do I have, Julia? Okay. Let me focus on the most important things that I've spoken about: the appropriate governance arrangements and the trade-offs, that need to be made. And this has stalled. Okay, yeah. But for us is one of the key. What do we? I suppose if we wish, before we started the program, about the many challenges, we would have designed the perfect program. But we have learned over time, and we have learned about the complexities of cross-cutting programs, because it's easy if you have your old purse strings. But in a country like ours, there's also a value in having these cross-cutting programs because of our 3-tier system of government and many other factors at play that perhaps would warrant us to work in the way that we do, that we currently do, but we would like to simplify many things still. Trade-offs I've spoken about, and there's a big thing is the role played by many interest groups with vested interests. You see, we talk lightly or about the importance of labor-intensive projects. The reality is, if I am one of the big 5 infrastructure companies in South Africa that built our World Cup stadiums and that colluded in such a big way that it was totally overpriced, why would I advance labor-intensive projects, even in subcomponents of my major project? So there are vested interests that work against us. And there's a glossary for your information, and that's my story. Thank you very much.